Now let's look at a simple example of using PDO to access a Microsoft SQL Server database. And I've created a project already and checked it into a GitHub repository that you have access to. So I'm going to start by opening git bash. And I'm going to change directory into czamp htdocs. So htdocs is the default root directory for documents using XAMPP. And then I'm going to check out the repository using git clone https://github.com pcc-cis234a. And then the repository name is popular shows.git. Oop, and I misspelled git. Okay, so now I've downloaded the repository, and I'm going to go ahead and start Google Chrome, and let's go ahead and load it and see what it looks like. So I'm going to go to localhost / popular shows, and there's a index.php file that automatically gets loaded. It takes a little while to load up. So what it does is it gives me two select boxes and a text field that I can type into. And for each combination of genre and type of title, it's going to show the top 50 most popular items from Internet Movie Database that had more than this number of votes, so more than 50,000 votes. So for example, if I want to see the most popular sci-fi movies, I can do that. Or if I want the most popular TV series, or if I want to change the minimum number of votes to a lower number so that I get more items coming back, I can do that. So pretty simple example. It's using Ajax to fetch the data. Let's actually look at what the project is doing. So I'm going to go ahead and open Phpstorm. And then let me go ahead and maximize that window. So popular shows is the root of the repository that I cloned. And if I open it, I see that I have my .gitignore file in here. The only thing I'm ignoring is the contents of the idea folder, which is for this particular project in Phpstorm. Here's the index.php, so let's start there. So this is all boilerplate that I got. Let me show you how to get that boilerplate in Phpstorm because it's kind of useful. So let me go ahead and right click on popular shows, create a new PHP file, and then I'm going to call it test.php. And I'm not going to automatically add to the repository. So if you want to go ahead and create that HTML block, you can close off that PHP tag, type HTML:5, and then hit tab. And that gives you all of this stuff to start with. So this is boilerplate. Let me change that title to popular shows. And then here, what I have is a download from code.jquery.com of jQuery minified. So this is the full jQuery package, but minified. And then I also have a CSS page that's really short that I've put in assets includes popular search.css. So assets includes popular search, It's pretty minimal, just has some table styling. And then also includes, assets includes popular search.js, which is here. And then what I'm doing is using a jQuery document ready function. Inside of that function, I have some additional functions, helper functions, to create the genre combo box, which actually is select list, create the type select list, to initialize the min votes field so that it's going to respond to input, and then to create the table that shows the popular shows. And we'll look at that in a little more detail in a minute. And then after it's defined all those functions, it goes ahead and calls create genre combo, create type combo, and create min votes field. So then in the index.php, I have the body of the document, which just includes a level 1 header. There's a div box for my search functions. So for the genre combo, the type combo, the min votes field, and the text min votes. And then there's a table that I use to display the popular shows, which includes a header line and an empty body. So after this is loaded, the document ready function is going to get run. And the first thing it's going to do is call create genre combo, which is up here at the top. So let's look at this code a bit. So what it's doing is it's finding the genre combo select item, which is right here in index.php. This select box right here has ID genre combo. And so we find that. And then it's using the Ajax function get JSON to fetch a set of JSON objects or JSON data from this URL. So it's going to hit assets actions fetch genres.php, and then when it gets results coming back, it's going to execute this code. And what it's actually going to get back, well, let's see it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that URL. And in the browser, I'm going to go ahead and fetch that. And we see what it returns is JavaScript object notation, an array of JavaScript object literals, which include an attribute genre and a value. So action, adult, adventure, animation, and so on. So an array of JavaScript objects. And then it's going to loop through that array of JavaScript objects one at a time. And for each of the objects, which includes a genre, it's going to get the value of the genre object. And then it's going to append an option to the combo box. So that's what causes it to have a list of genres in that first select box. And then it's also going to try to update the list of popular shows, which we'll look at in a minute. And finally, it's going to add a change event listener to the combo box. And when the value, the selected item in the select box is changed, it's going to call create titles table again. Next up, we have create type combo, and it's basically identical to create create genre combo. The only difference is that it's going to be setting the contents of the type combo select box, and it's fetching data from fetch title types instead of from fetch genres. And then pretty much the rest of it's the same. The results will have a title type attribute instead of a genre attribute, but it's setting up the combo box or the select box in the same way. To set up create min votes field, we're just going to add an event listener to the min votes field so that every time I change the value in there by typing, it's going to recall create titles table. And then finally, we have create titles table. So what this is going to do is it's going to get the contents of the combo box for genres and the contents or the selected item out of the title type select item. And then out of the min votes field, it's going to get the numeric value and store that in min votes. And if there's a syntax error, this will return not a number. And then it's also going to get the title type, the title table, and specifically the T body part of that, because we're going to want to add some rows to it. And then I have it logging the values that it fetched to the console so that we can see what's actually getting fetched. If I haven't gotten both a genre and a title, actually this should be title type. So if I haven't gotten both a genre and a title type, then I don't want to do anything else. If I don't have a valid number in min votes, or the number of min votes is less than 1,000, I want to set min votes to 1,000. And this is mainly an efficiency hack so that I'm not searching over every title in the database. I'm just searching over the ones that have 1,000 or more votes. This bit of code empties out all the rows that were previously in the titles table. And then I have another AJAX call. This time it's going to be calling fetchTitles.php, and it's going to be using get method to pass in the minimum number of votes, the title type from the title type select item, and the genre from the genre select item. So let's go ahead and see what that is going to return. So back to the browser, and I'm going to replace that with this. And then let's go ahead and set the minimum number of votes to 100,000. And then we'll set the title type to be, let's do movie, and the title genre to be adventure. Okay, and so what I got back is a little hard to read, but basically it's a bunch of rows from a database table, actually the IMDb database. And each row contains a primary table column value, a primary title, which is Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. It's got a start year column, which is 2003 for this row, average rating value, number of votes value, and then the second row, third row, and so on, up to 50 rows total. So it's an array of objects. And then for each object in that array, I'm going to take that title, which is a show, and I'm going to append the title to the title table. So that thing that shows the 50 best shows. So it's going to use an append, and here what I'm basically doing is creating a table row with 4 values as table data, including the primary title for the show, start year for the show, average rating for the show, and num votes. And that's basically it. So every time I change a value, either this change listener or the change listener on genre or this input listener on the vote is going to get called. And it's going to call this update method, which causes the code to fetch data from the database using AJAX. So how do you actually fetch the data from the database? Well, let's look at assets, actions, fetch titles. Assets, actions, and here we have fetch genres, fetch title types, and fetch titles. Let's go ahead and look at fetch genres. So all this is doing is it's calling a static method called getAllGenres off of the database class. It's encoding it in JSON format, so this is going to be an array of objects where each object has a genre property. It's going to turn that into a JSON literal string and then echo it, and that's what I get back from the database. Same thing with title types. It's going to call a static method called getAllTitleTypes and JSON encode it and return it to as the results of my AJAX call. And then fetch titles. This one's a little bit more complicated because I've passed in min votes as a get value and title type as a get value and genre as a get value. So this is going to call a static method called find titles that takes 3 parameters, returns an array of shows that get JSON encoded and then returned as a result of the AJAX call. So all of the heavy lifting is actually going on in this database class, which is required at the top of each of these actions. And that takes us to PHP includes database, where the interesting part actually happens. So here's the database class. I have some constants defined at the top. So this is using the server cisdbss.pcc.edu, and it's connecting to the IMDb database. It's the same one that you've used if you took 275 recently. Here's the 275 student user account and the 275 student user password. So I'm authenticating using the same credentials as you used in CIS 275. And then we have some queries. So this one is used to get all genres, and it's select distinct, and then I trim any space around the outside of the genre as genre from title genre table of the IMDb database. This one gets all of the different show types. And then this one is a little bit more complicated. So this is the query that fetches the most popular matching titles. And I'm using the PHP docstring functionality here. So angle, 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 and then a tag, which is terminated at the bottom, lets you define a multi-line string. And so I put the whole query formatted as a multi-line string here. And basically what it's doing is, I don't actually need that \n anymore. What it's doing is fetching the top 50 primary title start year average rating and num votes from the title basics table of IMDb, and then it's joining it to title ratings and joining that to title genre. Then it's filtering out any of them where the num votes is less than or equal to min votes. So this thing here is a parameter, and parameter binding in PDO, you can actually name the parameter and put a colon in front of it, which makes it a little easier to keep track of. And then it's also looking for title types that match the title type parameter and genres that match the genre parameter. So it's going to find the top 50 of those things ordered by average rating. So the 50 most popular titles with more than this number of votes, with this type and that genre. So how do I use these SQL strings? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need a database connection. So I have a static database property of the class, which is initially null. And then I have this static connect method, which is private, only used inside of this class, that basically says if this thing is null, then go ahead and make a new PDO database connection. So here's how you connect to the database using PDO. You say new PDO, and then you pass it a connection string, which is going to look like SQL serve server equals cisdbss.pcc.edu semicolon database equal IMDb. And then at the end of that connection string, you go ahead and give it the DB user, which is 275 student, and the DB password, which is 275 student. And this is going to return a new PDO object, which is actually a connection that you can use and call methods on. So now let's look at getting all the genres. So the first thing we do is we connect to the database. And then we're going to use prepared statements and parameter binding. This particular query doesn't actually have any parameters right now, but I'm doing it as a demo. So I'm going to call the prepare method on my database connection, and I'm going to pass it my get all genres query, which is select distinct blah blah. And that's going to give me a statement object. And then I can call the execute method on the statement object, and that will fetch the results. Then to convert the results, which is basically a table, a set of rows, I can call statement pointer fetch all and then use PDO : fetch assoc to get an array of rows where each value in the row is an associative array where the name of the attribute is named after the column name. So this is the thing that lets me get, for example, primary title is the column name, start year is the column name, average rating, and so on. It's that assoc, PDO assoc, that makes this be a named property. There are alternatives. For example, I can also use fetch num, and that's going to have 0 for the first column, 1 for the second column, 2 for the third column, and so on. But I like the name properties here. And then get all title types is exactly the same, except it's using a different query. And then find titles is a little more complicated because this one actually does have 3 parameters. It has min votes, title type, and genre in the query. And here I have min votes, title type, and genre that are getting passed in. There were 3 get parameters in the URL. They get passed into find titles. The connect part is the same. The prepare part is the same. But here, when I call execute, I'm passing it in an associative array. And the key here is the name of the parameter in the parameterized query. And the value is whatever value I want to bind to that parameter when I execute the database query. And then at the end, I go ahead and call the fetch all method of statement in order to get an array of objects. That array of objects gets returned to, for example, create titles table. Right here in data. And then data gets passed in, and for each row in data, for each object in the array of objects, I go ahead and add it to the table. And that's pretty much it. So go ahead and feel free to check out this code and look at it in detail, and let me know if you have any questions.